Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Daniel, welcome to Consulting Leaders. Happy to have you.
Happy to be here. Great video. I love it.
Thank you. Let's jump straight into it.
Okay.
What got you into consulting, Daniel? What's the story?
Well, I guess I don't know. Probably like everybody, you just end up drifting into it. I suspect that's the reality of it.
That's how it goes.
So I founded Arrival 22 years ago. I was working in the city, London City, for those people who don't know the term, the city. And my flatmate's younger brother was stabbed to death in a street incident. So the catalyst for me creating the consultancy was a tragic event. And I wanted to help young people like this young man that was murdered, which was, tragically over a game of Snake on a Nokia phone. It was completely pointless. And I had some contacts with an inner city school. And I just was really blown away by the young talent that was in that community. Now, obviously, that social mission that I started with has grown into being something much more commercial and more typical to an everyday consultancy. But that initial story is a kind of in our DNA because we have two businesses effectively. One is a social impact business, and we've helped over 7,000 young people over those 22 years in partnership with big blue chip businesses, global brands. And then what I do in my day job these days is I work with global executive teams to establish high performance organizations.
That's going to be interesting. We're going to take a bit of a tangent here. Why the shift towards a more traditional business model then? Is it to fuel the actual, not charity, but like the mission-driven?
Yeah, it does act. I mean, it's a social impact. It does act a little bit like a charity. There's very little surplus revenue in it. It keeps its face clean, and it's very sustainable. It's great because once you establish a client, they just stay with you forever. Some of those initial clients that we got, the likes of Artemis and Investec and stuff right at the beginning, they're still with us. So it's a very solid, repeatable dynamic. But I don't draw a salary from it. So I guess, I was on both the co-founders were on sort of fast track, typical corporate careers. And, and then, so this was a real left field direction and, amazing, full of meaning and purpose, and just opened all sorts of doors that was just probably wouldn't have been open for me. But the funding landscape radically changed post Brexit. And so, we had the ability to work downstream with very challenging young people who were 14 when we initially started through this kind of groundbreaking 4-year development program where we'd pick up the most interesting young people from these challenging inner city schools based on their influence, not on their academics. So we're just looking for the smartest kids in any year, and we pick up 30 kids, and these corporates, along with government funding, would run them through a 4-year development partnership with, financial service firms, construction, all sorts of different organizations. But as soon as Brexit happened, all the money disappeared. We lost all the European funding. All the money fell out of schools. So we had to pivot the model into working directly just with corporates. And of course, they're not willing to fund that extra support, just the bit that they can plug into those young people and experience it for themselves. And simultaneously, whilst I was doing that, we were having such a significant impact that I kept on working with ever and ever, better known executive teams. And eventually I found myself in front of Dave Lewis and the Tesco executive team about 8 years ago. And then things really took off. Dave became an investor in Arrival himself, along with a range of very well-known investors in the UK, from the likes of Silver Lake, Artemis, Lansdowne. And then we went on to work with the Sky executive, GPE, and then I've latterly been basically working around the globe. I pretty much now work with a leader from every single country on the planet now. So, I've worked directly with leaders through the kind of coaching relationship or experiences. We've worked with well over 1,000 leaders now in those 20 odd years. And it's sort of just the experience and what they wanted us to do just evolved and developed really off of that social impact work, which is how we started.
What's the number one problem that you solve now, Daniel? Talk to me like I'm the CEO of Tesco. Why not? Let's impersonate that. Like, what's going to be the impact on my bottom line? Social is amazing. I get it. It's like super value, mission driven. Like, I like that. How am I going to benefit from it?
So with our consultancy work, effectively what we're doing is we're re-establishing productivity and growth with performance, and almost always at the same time in a cost tightening environment. So how do organizations re-establish high performance cultures in the face of, certainly within the European Union and the UK, challenging economic situations? I'm sure your guests have all been saying the things. Businesses are really tightening up because budgets are tightening up, and yet we can see as we go into organizations how inefficient most large-scale organizations are. There is an absolute ton of things that they can still do to drive greater productivity and performance. And my initial insight that came to understand why we got into this place was basically on the back of quantitative easing. So in 2008, because so much money, free money or near free money came into the system, organizations struggled to deliver organic growth. So they went through a kind of universal playbook, probably established in the MBA programs, which was M&A, offshoring, streamlining, digitization. As a byproduct of that, cultures started to look internally. It became a very soft recruitment market. And instead of looking externally and doing what it takes to build capabilities and capacity to be deliver on growth, we fell into a kind of performative paradigm. So organizations looked inwards towards, beanbag and fussball, up popped kind of social driven cultural paradigms. And effectively we lost the capability also because a lot of management was wiped out in cost saving agendas. Organizations struggled to reestablish high performance. And what happens when that's the case is organizations lose what I call their alignment. And so when you get into a large organization, executives say stuff to the business, what they want, mindsets, behaviors, etc. But once you get down into the organization, they don't quite understand what that means. And at their level, either they can't relate to it or they don't see themselves as the person that the executive are talking to. They can't understand how they, in their day job, drive the strategic focus. And so what they do is they just get busy getting busy. And so when you step into an organization, not only do those executive messages not transmit down into the organization, everybody's just increased the volume of activity, programs, projects, meetings, one more digital training program or product on top of the other, and there's no traction left in organizations. So when I'm working with organizations, first of all, I try to understand where the alignment is broken, where the capabilities have been lost, where can people contribute and where they can't. And through that kind of insight and basically working with so many organizations in different markets and different geographies, I came up with our model, which is a value-aligned contribution. And why it works so well is it fundamentally moves culture on. it moves organizational focus on in a very kind of elegant way, but it also deals with the fact that most people can't contribute. And often they want to. Contribution is the most natural human instinct. But I would interview amazingly talented young people in different parts of the world, and they would tell me that they just couldn't contribute. Nobody wanted the contribution. Nobody was listening to the contribution. And these were the people who were out in the field, dealing with the customers and out in the market. And so organizations have lost the ability to allow everybody to contribute, because most people don't know what the strategic focus is and how to contribute to that. And managers don't know how to create the environment where people either want to contribute or that they feel that their contributions are going to be effectively assessed equally, and that the best ones are kind of scaled and unlocked. And so in that reality where nothing kind of works and the teeth of the cogs don't catch, you just get this huge bloating of activity in people, and a lot of it's very, very inefficient, or worse still, acts as a kind of breaker. So like if you're a leader and you want to know, is that my organization, look at how, for instance, decision making travels in a business. If you imagine a large organization as a pyramid, when an executive passes down a kind of strategic message, you get a cascading of decision making down to its appropriate level based on the position and where you are and your requirements. But what's happened over the last 20 years is decision making goes up organizations, not down. And it becomes an incredible bottleneck around executives who are really busy but can't understand why they don't get progress and headway in the organization, because people have fallen into socializing the risk of decision making, and don't know how to make decisions themselves. And so all of these decision makings are kind of moving back up the business rather than being pushed down to its appropriate level, which builds capabilities, get us closer to the market, to the customer, and allows for building for future capability and talent as people move up the pyramid. So, that's where I spend my time, is working with leaders to understand how their organization is designed, where is contribution happening and where is it not. And then in very simple terms, how do you remove everything that isn't aligned to, and I keep it to 3 as the magic number. What are your 3 priorities? What are your 3 focus points for this business? Does everybody understand that? And at every level, are people able to contribute effectively to that? Because if they can't, then either we need to insert some capability building for managers to help understand what the executive focus is, or those people are unable or unwilling to contribute, in which case it's we need to find a home for them that's better aligned to their skill and their talent and their energies. When I get into organizations and we start to look at different projects and different meetings, if people can't articulate exactly how it drives and stand that up, the resources and the manpower and the time and the energy to drive the strategic focus, then I encourage it to get shut down. And so very quickly people find that they have more space if they're not trying to decide for their entire business unit. They have more space and time to think about innovation, strategy, if they're not drowning in activity, if they're not drowning in projects and programs that aren't really connected or associated with the strategic focus of the organization. It sounds so simple and so basic, but it's like the final breakthrough in where we got to, which, let's call culture as we understand it currently as a kind of inclusion, which certainly in the UK has come to mean including everyone to everything and being nice, rather than, and there's an exceptional brilliance in the concept of DEI, which is diverse people, whatever that means, coming together from their diverse life experiences, drive different outputs. But what was missing over the last 20 years was the performance focus. And so we fell into kind of conversations around representation rather than how do we actually unlock people's contributions that the business wants and needs. And so I'm a huge fan of different sorts of people and skills and capabilities coming together. But what I'm not a fan of is where it's performative over performance. And it feels in some ways many organizations have lost the ability to have those hard conversations and make those difficult decisions. And they've lost sight of how an organization works in terms of design, architecture, and capabilities. And so, what I typically do is simplify, focus, rebuild that confidence and capability back into leaders, because I typically just work at a leadership level, and ensure that everyone in their organization understands exactly what they want, what they don't want, what looks good, what is less useful, and ensure that's happening in every meeting, every team, every project, by focusing on the key assets, the growth assets, where we can win as an organization, and ensuring that everything else in the organization is quietened down or removed.
So make your low performance teams and leaders become high performance teams and leaders. Productivity increases, potentially at a lower cost, make more revenue, make more profits. High performers are attracted to places that have other high performers, make more revenues, make more people, attract more people, make more profits. Is that?
That's definitely one way of looking, and you've described a kind of virtuous circle, right? Like great organizations where talent can actually contribute attract more talent, understandably, because people find pleasure and enjoyment in contributing and being a part of a collective problem, right? Whatever it is. And sometimes the greater the problem, the greater the reward in terms of a sense of achievement. Absolutely. And at the same time, removing people who don't want to contribute effectively anymore, because everything is changing so fast. A lot of people are unwilling or don't want to really be a part of that change. And for a range of reasons, right? You get to a point in life where you just don't want to work that hard, or don't want to learn some new technology or a different approach. And obviously AI is having a huge impact in the organizations that I work with. But I feel like people-driven performance has become a kind of secondary conversation to AI. But actually, most large people-driven organizations are poorly structured, don't have lost capability and ability to simplify their business so that they can actually deliver, because there's so much wastage in most organizations because people are busy running programs or trying to interpret what the leadership want at their level, but probably doing things that aren't necessarily connected, or in fact might add as a kind of dead weight to that focus. And no one's looking over the shoulder and assessing it because nobody quite knows. And so that's what I often find in the organizations I work with is, where are we going, why are we going there, and how do I contribute to it seems to have been lost. I know that sounds ridiculous because it sounds so simple, but actually that kind of reestablishing those capabilities in large scale organizations seems to be very difficult, because over the last 20 years we sort of let all of that competency and capability and focus drift, because I think we believed that tech would answer all our problems, or that offshoring or digitization or streamlining or improving our logistics or whatever it was that people applied pretty much universally, M&A, was going to give us the growth and the performance headway that we needed. But now money is more expensive. People are being found out. As the cost of money rises, organizations, because it has a sort of compounding nature, organizations find themselves in more and more of a pickle. And a lot of leaders don't know how to get back to basics, because they've grown up in a kind of more performative time, where now we're in there's a kind of urgency required now in organizations to ensure that we can streamline our organizations effectively and get everybody operating to their maximum.
How do you market all this, Daniel? How do you get the right people knocking at your door being like, hey, I'm interested? How do you market? How do you brand?
Well, I guess 2 or 3 ways. Like most consultancies, most of my work is inbound because I'm already known. either because leaders move to different organizations, or I've worked with them in the past, or they're referred. Lots of work we've got is been referred. That's typically how it works at kind of executive leadership level. It's highly unlikely that you're going to win a piece of work if you're unknown, to be honest. And then I generally invest quite a bit of time in establishing thought leadership. I write an article, once a week, I suspect, something like that. And I do podcasts, and I've ended up in a lot of national press, Business Insider, the FT, Times, The Guardian, whatever, pretty much all the publications, talking about the things that I spend my time thinking about and working with leaders on. So so it's a kind of combination of always investing in relationships and building those relationships. And it's a bit of a journey from cold to warm. It just takes time. Trust and judgment are absolutely critical in my space. And so I like to write things so people can. I sort of remain at the top of people's minds around kind of current issues that I hope would be kind of practical to them, but aligned with what I can help them with. So those are the kind of two particular routes. I'm not a big fan of advertising. I'm not sure it's a good use of resource. But I like to be a bit more targeted and know the people that actually are going to, at least within the UK, who are potentially going to work with us. Conversations, catch-ups, those sort of things.
So, you're clearly mastering your topic very, very well. You're in business for more than 2 decades now. I have a certain respect for people who stay in an industry, a niche, at the same company for that long. It means that they figured out a thing or two about business, in my opinion. Yeah. You don't need to market. People come to you because they know you, and you do, I'm sure, a great job.
Yeah.
What's your challenge then, Daniel? What is the one nut that you're trying to crack that once you crack, you're going to achieve the next thing that you want to achieve?
Yeah. Well, I think we touched on it. I think there's a whole range of seismic events happening right now at the same time. And that can impact external consultancies, because the first thing a corporate does is turn off the external tap. So whether it's recruiting younger people or stop working with consultancies, that's usually the first tap or taps they'll turn off, because they don't want to have to go through the painful experience of necessarily letting some of their current staff base go. So there's the kind of a series of, certainly within the UK, kind of issues are hitting the UK. We're sort of in a recession, although the data wouldn't suggest it, but it definitely feels like it. Try and tell hospitality and retail that we're not in a recession. It's tough out there, isn't it? And Brexit, that really hurt us. And we're also in a kind of declining cycle anyway. So we're at the edge of Europe post-Brexit, in a generally kind of very difficult global environment where there's lots of headways and pressures, tariffs and wars and other issues that just make doing business harder. And so scaling a consultancy has always been hard. I'm sure that's the kind of common conversation with your network. It's really difficult. And I took investment. So finding an exit that's really attractive at significant scale without a digital play really isn't easy. And so you have to really focus your organization on where you can win and where there's real appetite or a pain within your client group that people are willing to resource. So scale would be a challenge for me. Ensuring that I have the right caliber people in the organization to deliver, because in one sense, when I speak to executives, an advantage for an organization, a consultancy like mine, is they don't necessarily want to work with the big boys because they charge a lot. The partner steps off the work very quickly. You get a junior consultant on the work, and they end up kind of educating the junior consultant, so they don't get any value. But at the same time, there's security in those kind of brands, isn't there? And so getting in front of those kind of established players is not easy, although we've achieved that magnificently well over the years. You know, we've beaten some very big brands to work. And then dealing with AI. And so lots and lots of resources thrown at AI. And I'm not convinced all of these job losses are actually attributed to AI. I think they're actually hiding the fact that lots of market conditions are difficult and businesses are having to justify their resource allocation into these AI investments by either removing people or not hiring people and slowing down external services. But AI is also advancing really quickly. It's really interesting. I'm sure you use it regularly like I do. I mean, it's really coming on at a hell of a rate. It's fascinating stuff, but I don't believe that it's the magical answer, at least not yet. And I don't believe that a lot of the kind of lack of recruitment is actually driven by AI. I don't see that AI just yet can give that growth. But all of everybody's piled in. And people are still trying to figure out how they use AI in a way that's going to give them the growth numbers, not the cost reduction. So, it's much easier to apply it in kind of removing low-level administrative roles. But it's much, much harder to figure out how it's going to become a commercial driver. And so, there's all of those factors. If I'm going to be completely open and honest and nobody's going to watch this is exactly the issue that I would have thought every consultancy is facing. It's a really difficult market. And so, we're exceptional in some things. We have an incredible network here in the UK in terms of relationships, and we're very well respected in the fields that we operate. And that gives us some protection, but it's definitely challenging. It's challenging on lots of fronts, and I would assert that almost all consultancies would probably hold their hands up and say that's true for them as well.
Sure. I mean, market conditions, attracting the right talent that wants to work and that wants to stay. AI is very, very common. Mm-hmm. Scale depends on the goal, right? Not everybody is looking at growing and scaling. What's interesting is that that's just thought experiment here, because I think there's going to be people listening to us going through exactly the same challenge. That's actually very likely, but with actually a component of yours, which is back to marketing, right? When there is no perceived value in advertising, because that's not the right allocation of resources. At the same time, looking at scaling, how are you thinking about that then, Daniel? Because on one hand, I'm thinking, yeah, okay, we want to scale. We want to maintain brand value and, authenticity and relationships. But if the thing that's commonly accepted as the thing that allows you to scale is when you want to go to market, you're going to find something that's going to allow you to talk to many more potential decision makers. Yeah. So how are you thinking about solving the challenge with that specific thought process of yours?
Yeah. So you've got two options, haven't you? Or three, maybe. You're going to have a digital play, because that's the only way you can scale in some ways. Hence, so many consultants have embraced AI.
What do you mean with digital play?
Well, you've got to the only way you can get kind of really significant scale is through some sort of digital component to your offering, right? Or
in the product itself, you mean?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay. In the offer. Okay.
Yeah, in the offer. Yeah, exactly. Or you're looking to go overseas, and therefore you're in a kind of numbers game. And you already flagged that. running a consultant is a little bit like running a hairdresser's. Young, talented people very quickly want to go off and cut their own hair. And so keeping hold of really interesting talent is never easy. And experienced wise heads are very expensive in this space, So you've got to choose where you play. Now, the scale bit that I've mastered or figured out is the fact that our IP can have huge impact in terms of cost saving and value across the organization. And with a comparatively small team, I can work across an extended leadership team of, say, 100 leaders or whatever in a large organization with a team of 4, say. And so that has a huge benefit for me. But of course, you have to have, I've moved up that kind of ladder in terms of what I can charge based on the value and expertise that I have. And I work at the very top of the very best organizations. So that was the way I ultimately decided on it, because you either go for a kind of geographical reach, or you go for a kind of digital scale, or you go for a price escalation. And I decided I just wanted to be more like a Rolls Royce and go up the kind of pay scale, partly because I'm just really interested in people and working with executive teams. I just find those conversations so interesting, and so does and those are the sort of people that I've attracted who can navigate at a kind of commercial level very complex conversations and situations, both internally and externally. I think one of the things that I did master over those 20 years is how to create change, and it's at a kind of people organizational level, and it's not easy to do. But I was just super interested, partly because my father was like a famous therapist. He's no longer with us, but he'd kind of worked with the kind of rich and famous and, Hollywood actors and stuff. And so as I was growing up, I was listening to him talk about human dynamics and how people change. And so I was always interested in that side of things. And when you realize that, organizations are made up of people, and people absolutely can change, but it takes something, and but they can change through just ideas and conversations. And that was a very compelling and exciting idea for me, and probably at the heart of what drives me is, ideas and the ability to change the world through ideas. You see it in that social impact work that we did, but also in the kind of work we do now. I'm really interested in ideas, and ideas can scale, right?
They very much can. Daniel Snell, ladies and gentlemen. Daniel, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
Or they can, go online and look up wearearrival.com, or they can find me on LinkedIn for sure, and come and say hello. I'm pretty open to sharing stuff. So if people want to come and drop me a digital note, they're really welcome. And I'd just like to say thank you, Guillaume, and thank you to your audience, and thanks for reaching out.
Thank you. We'll put all the links in the description. I can say one thing for sure is that you gained at least one new connection on LinkedIn out of this interview, Daniel. I just added you. Thanks so much for coming on Consulting.
All right. Yeah, look after yourself, pal.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.